Hello, I want to thank you for watching this video. First of all, making these videos are really difficult because basically everything is totally unscripted and I'm just kind of making this off the top of my head. And I also just want to make sure that what I'm saying is accurate and all that, so I appreciate your patience on this. The purpose of these videos is just to share knowledge and about areas that I'm pretty enthusiastic about and interested in. And today I just wanted to kind of demo an application. It's not really a a real world application, but it could be, and it's not going to win any design awards. But I just wanted to demo a front end Angular application that uses Amazon Cognito for its authentication and user store, if you will. And once you're logged in, it'll go ahead and make a REST API call out to the Amazon API gateway, as well as having that gateway invoke a Lambda function where the results come back. And so let me just kind of demo the application or just run it from the beginning so that you can see it from start to finish, and then I'll get a little bit into the details of the different technology there. This is not a tutorial because it's not really a step-by-step, but I'll show you a whole bunch of information that will get you to the point where you could piece these together if you want, or to do another tutorial. Or maybe in the future I might have time permitting, I might create a tutorial. So this is more or less just trying to fire hose you with information. So here's the Angular application. Like I said, it's not going to win any awards. It's just basically asking for a user, which we don't have any right now. So that's why you're getting this message. And we're going to store the authentication information up in the cloud using Cognito. So the user doesn't exist, so I need to register it. So I'm going to go ahead and register my user. Once I register it and hit the register, it's actually sent the request up to the cloud, and and what we can do is check our inbox for a validation code or a verification code that we get, and then we can enter this in. And once we do that, then we will be good to go. So before I do that, I actually wanted to show you the concept of Cognito. Um, bare bones, Cognito is like they say here, it's a simple user identity and data synchronization service. I almost want to say it's like having your own Active Directory up in the cloud, or I'm an ASP.NET programmer. In the olden days, if you will, we used ASP.NET membership providers, which allowed your application, ASP.NET application, to store users and passwords in a database. And so think of Amazon Cognito as a database of users plus all kinds of nifty functionality against those users up into the cloud. So getting back to the main concept behind Cognito is a user pool. So let me go back into my Cognito dashboard just so you can actually see. If you click on Cognito, it'll take you right to the screen. We don't want to do federated identities, although you can, and that way you can actually wire up your interface to Facebook and Twitter, and do that connection there. In our case, we just created a user pool. I called it test pool, and inside of here, I have currently one user, and that was the user that I went ahead and tried to register. So, and if we take a look at that, I just wanted you to see this. You can see the status right now is unconfirmed. And why is that? It's because we're sent out an email, after we registered, that we have yet to confirm. So I'm going to hop over to my Gmail account, which, by the way, this is just, I use this Gmail account for spam and all that. I don't use it as my primary. So you got your verification code. This came in from Cognito, and it's saying 753446. So let's go ahead and type that back in here, do the validation code, and now we can actually confirm, and now we can actually log in to the application. with the password that we provided. Note these options up here after I log in. They changed a little bit slightly. So now our home page says, hey, we're logged in, we're authenticated. I added this other little thing called a REST call, and this is actually invoking a REST endpoint and the Amazon API gateway to return data, and this data is being returned from a Lambda function that the gateway is actually calling. So getting back to our user pools right here, let's see if we refresh. I just did a refresh up here on the user. You could see that we're confirmed. And if I click on this, you can see information here about the user. You can use groups, you can reset the password, you can tell them that they got to use multi-factor authentication, you can disable or delete the user as well. I would encourage you, like I said, this is not a tutorial. It's going to go through all these details, but I would encourage you to do a little bit more research as well and to see what you can do with these user pools. But Cognito is a perfect scenario for an application that would be like a mobile app where you require people to authenticate before calling certain features on your app. So you can use Cognito for this. You know, and then you've got all these different features up here. You also have one of the things I wanted to show, which I thought was actually pretty cool, are these triggers. So imagine, if you will, that you have a user pool in the company. You have all these triggers, which are basically Lambda functions that you can invoke that on your account. So when you do a pre-sign up or a pre-authentication or a post-authentication, you've got confirmations. As you can see, there's all these triggers. And why would you want to do something like that? Well, imagine, if you will, that you want to do, you have different workflows in your company. You may also want to record whenever somebody has actually signed up or has actually logged in or whatever. You could have a call Lambda function, if you will, that actually saves the request to a database. So you can do your reporting later on to see how many logins to your pool that you got, how many new accounts you got, and all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty nice. You can also create other identity providers on your client, so you can actually support OAuth 2 if you want, in the different OAuth flows. You got your code grant flow and your implicit flow. And basically, that OAuth 2 is something I'm really interested in. And the main difference between the code grant flow and the implicit grant flow is the implicit's predominantly used for your JavaScript web applications, where you don't really want to store your client secret and things like that on there. So you can actually get a token returned back to your application without having to have the extra security step of a authorization code. So this is the most secure. But anyways, I'm diverting. But you get the point. So now we're actually logged in, and now you can log out of the application, in which case these options are available to you again. And as you can see, we are not authenticated in here. So how did I make this happen through the Angular application? So there's this package for JavaScript enabled libraries called AWS Amplify, and it's just basically the Amazon Cognito Identity SDK, and you can incorporate it into your Angular application, if you will, and other applications front end. And it's got some really decent code examples in here on how to use it, so I think it's pretty cool. In the case of this Angular application, the one you're looking at in this demo, and the one that's not going to win any awards for design and all that, we're using an authorization service. And this authorization service is, well, an Angular service is a singleton, by the way, that actually you can inject into all of your other components. It's a single source of truth for authentication. So we're actually importing the Amazon Cognito Identity library that I showed you. Of course, I've got my user pool ID, which I'm going to delete, and my client ID, which I'll end up deleting there too. And the idea here is that, you've got your register method, your confirm authorization code method, and your sign up method or your sign in. And as you can see, it's using Angular observables, which are, I like to consider those much smarter promises that never seem to die, if you will. You can subscribe to them through your applications. Pretty cool stuff there. So you got your sign-in functionality, which, when you're logging in, you construct a user object. So the user's actually logged into the app, and then we go ahead and say, hey, cognito, authenticate us. And if cognito says you're good, it goes in here. If not, it goes in here. This is just kind of, how you set up your user data before you call the authentication. Same with the confirm auth code step, as you saw in there when I typed in the authorization code and I said, hey, please confirm this registered user. And of course, we got to register. And now as far as the menu is concerned, the hiding and showing of these given options based on whether or not you're logged in, that magic's happening up here in the menu header component that is using another little helper function inside of the authorization service called is logged in. So based on that, these menu options are going to hide and show up there. Here's the register. So when you register a new user, excuse me, basically after you've registered, so here's a register. So we actually are calling the register method in the auth service. And then just validating whether or not we want to show the next set of HTML, which is right here where you get your authorization code. And then when you go ahead and actually enter in your authorization code and do your form submit, goes to this method, which comes down here into the validate auth code. So it reaches out to cognito and it says you're all good to go. So that was the register component. And then of course we got the login component. So this is after you've registered. So you got your email, your password, your login. We go to your submit inside of here, which actually reaches out to the authorization service and it calls the sign in. And once you're logged in, we go back to our home page. So in the sign in, as you saw in the authorization service, is actually going to call the, it's going to just basically do this login up here. So I know I kind of breezed through this stuff real fast, but I'll make the code available out there so you can kind of go through it as well. So the next thing I wanted to cover was the API gateway. If you log in, you can make a REST API call here. Let me log in here. So we're authenticated, so we're making a REST call, and we're actually going out to the API gateway at that point, and we're getting a response back. So what's going on there? Let's take a look. So let me go back to my console, go to your API gateway, and I've got one API out here. So the API gateway is another service by Amazon, which allows you to create REST endpoints. And your REST endpoints from Amazon can actually delegate the data and traffic to Lambda functions, or it could delegate it to other REST endpoints from within your company. It's really, really good stuff there. So let me click on here just to kind of, because pictures are worth more than just my words, because I ramble on a lot. So I just clicked on this API. As you can see, we've got a resource. You got different actions here. So we're looking at our main resource for this test API. And as you can see, we've got various methods that we can create. So I'm not actually going to create it, but you can create more methods right here. I just happen to, so at your root. So I actually created like another resource here, which is called test data. And inside of there, we've got, our methods. We've got our get method and our post method, and we've got this mock endpoint. So this get method is actually what we're calling from our Angular application inside of this REST API component. And so the way this works is once ng init gets called, meaning the component's been successfully loaded and rendered properly, we're just saying, hey, we just want to make sure that we really do have a validated session here for the user. Then we're going to construct an authorization header, almost like an OAuth 2 token, if you will, kind of like the bearer token. We actually are going to ask cognito for our JWT token, and we're going to go and set it in the authorization header, and then we're going to make this API call to our API gateway, and we're going to pass the header object in there. If the gateway is happy, if we get data back, it goes into this. If we don't, right now it's just logging an error, and that's where you might want to do some custom exception handling, things of that nature. So let's take a look at this endpoint. What is this actually? So if we hop back to our API gateway, here's our test API. We've got our resources here. So think of this little section right here where you can do your development and you can make changes to your methods. Stages is actually, right now I have just a dev stage, but you can create like a production stage, a QA, you can create other stages. So here's the workflow basically is each of these methods you want to support, you basically have a nice flow, so it kind of starts here, it goes here, goes into the Lambda function that we're calling, and then response comes back out to the client. Once you actually get these things set up properly, then you can deploy. So you can say, I actually want to deploy this API, and I want to deploy it to my dev stage. Assuming if we had like a QA or production or something else, those would show up in the drop down, but dev is our only one right now in this case. But if I go onto my stages and I look at dev, you can see this URL endpoint right here. So this particular endpoint is what you've got going on right here. So anyways, just wanted to mention that. So let's take a look back at the resources, because there's a few things I wanted to show you. This may look daunting at first, but you'll get used to it in time. So everything starts from here. You can actually test your methods too. But you got your method request, and one of the things that I wanted to show is how you can hook your cognito user pool up to your, one of your methods or all of your methods and such. And you can do that by authorizers in the gateway. So if I click on here, if you notice right here, we've got this authorization set to test auth. Basically, this says you can't call this method unless you're properly authenticated against this particular identity, if you will, link. And we called this test auth. And basically, what that is it's a cognito user pool authorizer. So let me click on that and show you what that's all about. So if you go down 2 tabs right here, I just created a new authorizer, and that's what we've got going on here. So if you create like a new authorizer, there's different things you can do inside of there, but I went ahead and said I want to invoke, or I want to actually authorize against the cognito user pool. As you can see here, you can authorize against a custom Lambda function, or you can authorize against a custom user pool. So that's basically what I did there. So I'm going to cancel out of this because I already created this, and I called it test auth. So if I go back to resources again, back to my get method, that's what this is all about. If you try to call this method and you don't have a proper token that comes back from your cognito pool, you'll get a 401. It'll just stop you right there. But if you pass that step, then it goes to the next step in the pipeline, if you will, which is to say, now we want to call Lambda function, our integration request. And we just basically, you can specify which Lambda function you want to call right there. There's other things that you can do, with mapping templates. Mapping templates allow you to take the incoming request and convert it to something else, if you will. So I won't go into details there, but I just wanted you to know that they were there. So the main thing for this one is that we're calling a Lambda function. And the name of the Lambda function is called getTest. And after that's called, it's going to pass it through the response and the method through this pipeline right here. And it's going to pass it through this pipeline. And I can kind of show you these in a second here. But if we take a look at our Lambda function, getTest, it's a real simple do nothing function using the Node.js runtime. Now Lambda also allows you to do C# and, as you can see, Java and all that. The way I like to think of Lambda is it's kind of like a stored procedure, if you will, in SQL Server or MySQL or MariaDB and those things. But in this case, it's a stored procedure, the way to think of it. And you've got your main callback or your entry handler. So this is when you call the Lambda function from the API gateway. When this gets called right there, it actually goes right into here. And again, this is basic. It's almost like hello world, if you will, but it's just basically returning an array of data objects. So these here, as you can see, is what you're looking at right here in the actual Angular application. So let me go back to my Lambda console. This callback is basically like returning out of your Lambda function successfully. So you have to use the callback method on there, and then here's your data. If you had an error, then this first argument would contain an error and exception, if you will. But if everything's kosher, then it goes to right here where you've got your array of objects. Let's see here if there's anything else I need to cover. Lambda's like a whole class unto itself, and oh yeah, one of the things I did want to mention, you've got a maximum of 5 minutes for your function, your Lambda function to execute. Most Lambda functions, from what I understand, should just basically have one purpose, and you really should take that into consideration. You don't want to spend too much time in there. You will be charged for for each function call and the duration of your function. But it's relatively cheap. But the main thing is you don't want to be doing anything that's lengthy and time consuming in your Lambda function, because if it goes over 5 minutes, it's going to terminate. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you have to do something that's going to potentially take more than 5 minutes, they recommend chaining your Lambda functions together so that you can ensure basically that you're not going to spend more than 5 minutes in one. But if I understand, in the real world, typically Lambda functions are, you get called, you do something quick, and then you return. So let's get back to the gateway. So we've called our Lambda function, and then we go back to this integration response, and I'm using the defaults. There's really nothing much going on here, but if you wanted to take the output of your Lambda function and tweak it a little bit or whatever, this is the option in the area that you can do it in. You got these body mapping templates, which also allow you to tweak and transform the output of your Lambda function into another object that gets set back, passed back into your method response right here. So, and then here you've got your response headers that you can send back to the client, things of that nature. And then it goes back out to the client. So let me show you one more thing that I wanted to mention. This integration request, I kind of skipped over it, and I just wanted to make sure I covered it here. You don't have to always call a Lambda function in your gateway. Supposing you have a legacy or not a legacy, just that supposing you have an internal API, REST endpoint, or another web service or whatever, this is what this integration type is right here. So you can actually have it call a regular HTTP endpoint. So I just wanted you to be aware that you're not required to just call Lambda functions there. So now we go back to the client, which means we're back into the Angular application, into this REST API components. And we go here with our JSON output, and we are good to go. We are showing data right there. And then, of course, we can log out. And I think, though, there was one other thing I wanted to cover with the Lambda function. We have it set up to call CloudWatch logs. This is kind of outside the scope of this demo, but what I wanted you to be aware of is, like, if you have a Lambda function that's being invoked, you can kind of trace your output of the Lambda function with console.logs or whatever. And if you enable CloudWatch logs, then how would we do that? So we would actually deploy this. So let me do this right here. I just wanted to make sure I show you. Like I say, I'm winging this. I'm kind of making this up off the top of my head. So let's just say we made some changes. We're happy with it. We're in the resources part right here. Now we want to actually deploy it. So I'm going to deploy it to my dev stage, but if I had a QA or production, you could deploy it there too. So I'm going to say test deploy, and I've actually deployed it. So now it goes to the next stage. If you look here, again, we're in the dev stage. And the first part here, I kind of didn't mention anything about it too. This is pretty cool. You can throttle your events, because my understanding is API Gateway is really fast. It can handle tens of thousands of requests per second, if not millions, but don't quote me on that. But you're going to pay, again, for your throttling, but just know that it's there. And so there's things that you can do with client certificates. Also, to make it even faster, you can enable an API caching, and you're going to get charged for that. So for this example, I did not turn caching on, but in production environment where speed and performance is really critical, that's definitely an option worth considering. Stage variables, that's kind of like environment stuff going on there. Deployment history, you can see all the times that you deployed. Logs is one of the things I wanted you to see here. You can enable CloudWatch logs. You can set a logging level. You can also set up CloudWatch metrics inside of here, but I have logs turned on. So if I go to my CloudWatch console, let me go back to my AWS here and go to my CloudWatch console, if you will. Go to logs. As you can see, I've got the get test, which was what we called here, and you've got your different requests, of when you made the call, things of that nature. So this just allows you to see all of your requests to your Lambda function. So if you look real close, let me just show you this. Go back to where my Lambda was. As you can see, I've got a console.log that says in callback of data, which is this right here. If I go back to my CloudWatch logs for this particular log group, so these are different applications that they call them log groups. So if I click on that, go back to my latest, you can see that little piece of text here. It says in callback of, and we're actually showing our data right there. So that's another way that you can kind of debug your Lambda function as it gets called. And so they encourage you to turn on logging. So that's another really nice feature of AWS. So I plan to make this Angular application available. It's kind of difficult to make the API gateway available, because it's like I'm not really seeing an easy way where you can actually script that out. So in that case, I'd highly recommend, you can double check, do some tutorials. There's some, good video courses that you can take on the subject. But I hope this just kind of gave you a fire hose of information on, the cognito service, the API gateway, Lambda, and CloudWatch, and how you can basically call the API gateway through an Angular application. Could also be React or just a plain old JavaScript, if you will, or some Vue or whatever you want. Where it reaches out and calls the API gateway, and make sure that you're authenticated first through cognito. So, and like I said, I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope it enlightened you a little bit, or gave you some motivation or something to do further research. And at the very least, I hope it exposed some of the services out there on which you can use these for. So thanks again for watching, and I'm sorry for all of my ands and ums and my rambling, but I just wanted to kind of, do some knowledge sharing there, and because I like that kind of stuff. So you have yourself a great one, and take care. Bye-bye.